I think you should care. Take my only niece, for instance. Why, I shall insist on our laying marrying into a household of our same social status. She mustn't marry below us. Not that I'm a snob, mind you, but because I know that if you mix social class and background, it would end in disaster. It will never work. I'm convinced it just would not work.
How would you describe my social standing currently?
Your social standing?
How would you describe my social standing currently?
Wow, fascinating question. Your stock is rising.
Okay.
That's one.
Okay.
Yeah, that's for sure. For sure, your stock is rising. But I think it's because of the work that you're beginning to put in, and the kind of exposure that that you're starting to get, and this is kind of in this very focused track lah, that you're currently going on. At this point of time, theatre. What do we hope to achieve from showcasing "The Moon Is Less Bright" by Goh Poh Seng? You first.
Okay. Well, I guess simply put, it's a question of how much we want to place our perception on top of
the script.
Yeah. Right. I think it's really about how we exercise a certain kind of meaning making when we meet someone. Before we meet someone.
Yes. Okay.
We might have heard of them. But then we make our own, preconceived story about them or character. But at the end of the day, how much do we know the person truthfully and honestly? How much do we actually know about them? And how is that different from our initial judgment, I guess, about them? And I think you will always be making a judgment, whether conscious or subconscious,
Yes.
And I think you will agree with me on that. But how much of that do you want to sort of put into play when you actually interact with them, or are put in a situation where you have to think or talk about them?
Fascinating, right? That this play was written in '63, staged in '64, and for us to retain most of Goh Poh Seng's original writing, the decision that we've now made. I just think it's really, really fascinating that 55 years on, in a very different society, the same play can be read so differently, because the context which you will read the class differences then, the social context which an audience could read it is so different from now, but there's the new resonances that you can pick up on with growing up in the last 30 years or so, or even if you are an older person, you knew what it would have roughly been like in the 60s.
And now
you can still pick up a lot from that. So I guess that psychological aspect of it is just something that I'm kind of banking on, that if people respond to it, like if they can catch on to all these things that we hope to show, it kind of proves the point that class differences really is a thing that people are aware of, consciously or subconsciously. It is there, it exists.
When I was growing up as a boy, I was brought to see the city. It was my very first time there, and I was completely dazzled by what I saw. Such big houses, such wealth. And then when I came home, I saw our small farm. That our house was only a hut made of wood, and my parents had bent backs and thin bodies, and I realized how poor we were. I tell you, I was stricken with such sadness and bitterness.
Why is a conversation about social standing important in Singapore?
So we talked about this last year actually. I'm not sure if it was before you approached me about Moon or after, but at the time, the public conversation hadn't opened yet. The public conversation at the time last year in 2017 was about race. Race was a hot button topic last year, but so things like the IPS study of social capital, the news hadn't broken out yet. Professor Teo Yuan's book hadn't come out yet. They were both on their way to coming out, and we started making this prediction, right, that the real thing was to do with class and not so much race, because race is something that you can't control. You were born with it, but class is something that instinctively people feel you have some responsibility over, and therefore you might be culpable or liable to where you are. So to me, that makes for a very fascinating conversation, because is it your fault that you are where you are now? Yeah. Or is it by your merit on the converse? Fault necessarily meaning if you're a less than ideal situation, the fact that you remain there, is it your fault? The fact that you have you're so attached to a way of reading other people based on class differences, are you to be held responsible for it? Or are there wider social forces which we can sort of assign responsibility for? So I think that's at the heart of the conversation about class differences. Like, to what extent are we really culpable, responsible for our views, rightly or wrongly as they are, based on our background or based on what we've experienced? So I guess it's important because it's different from things like race or gender, sexuality, where they're largely not, they're things that you just are. But this one is a bit different because it always feels like you could do something about it. Yeah. What would you have to give up if you choose to move to improve your social standing?
I feel like improving your social standing, I guess there's a lot of work that you have to do with yourself first, because I think it must come from a place where you really want it.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you kind of have to have the mindset for it.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the first and foremost for me. If there's a radical change that you want to make in life to improve your place in society or whatever, first and foremost is the mindset. And I think what you would have to give up is everything that will come in the way of that attitude.
Yeah.
For example, complacency or procrastination. Very,
you see that in yourself?
Very simple things. I do, especially procrastination, especially now. I think that I'm not in school anymore, because then deadlines will be your own.
Okay.
For example, So yeah, I think a lot of the giving up would have to be that you are going to focus, especially on yourself.
Okay.
In order to improve yourself, and then things will fall into place, I think, as you make your journey.
I suppose it's only because I'm a lowly farm girl and did not have the benefits of a proper upbringing, and I don't see the sense. My parents, in fact all of us, are not well versed in this refined things and manner of behavior. That's the problem.